Humans of Earth, welcome to AI Snap That. My name is Michael Rollins, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Thanos, he of the Snapdom. We are here to help you cope with your impending job loss to a robot. Thanos, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a totally normal day in California here. Nothing
Oh,
extraordinary
Jesus.
has happened.
Is
It's
is
just
the
everything is totally fine.
have they declared martial law yet? Or
No,
God,
it's like,
every
dear
time
me.
it sometimes our nation at the moment feels like. Have you ever been to a NASCAR race?
I believe no.
So it's a relatively boring event, and
That I knew.
you got these
That is
really
just
loud cars
probably
that
pissed off about half of America right now.
go
Thankfully.
around a circle. But here's the thing: it gets really exciting really fast when all of a sudden everything goes sideways. Right? This feels like it has been an eventful like decade, and then at some point somebody decided to up the ante in the car wreck, and you found out that there's like a plutonium bomb in the middle of it. And so now it's like super exciting to watch, but not in a way that anybody wants it to be exciting. So, yeah.
I thought it was fun to watch the Elon Trump thing just
Oh, that was good.
go to bits. But, the National Guard, that's kind of a different level stuff there.
Dude, I do feel like the
Uh,
National Guard really upped the ante. I
yeah.
mean, it's kind of like if your ex-boyfriend were to send like a hitman to your door, because Elon's in California,
Or a
right?
SWAT team, or yeah, something
SWAT
like that.
team, SWAT team that he happens to own, something like that. But yes, the breakup was hard for me. I watched
Yeah.
the back and forth, and I just felt sad.
Yeah, it went from like where we love each other as much as two straight men can do so to your pedophile, and it's
Okay,
like, wow,
somebody did a VO movie thing of Trump and Elon, and like Elon goes off to Mars, and then Elon and Trump just pine for each other. Oh my God. I
did it
watched it.
have "Can't Live If Living Is Without You" playing in the
Yeah,
background?
I cackled. I was like, oh, this is great. But I'm glad that they could break up before Pride Month.
Technically,
Or did they
yeah.
not?
I don't know. It is June. It's been June for 9 days. It feels this hasn't been
Okay.
going for that long. But
It has, you're right. So, anyways, no politics. Okay, today we were just chatting beforehand. I said, hey, have we done much talk about MCP servers? And you said, yeah, I did at the coding thing that you do, which we need to plug here in just a moment. You said, and it was just nobody, it's not a big deal. And I was like, oh, my friend, I have news for you. So first off,
should I clarify? My no big deal is I didn't get the feeling that there were any particularly massive advantages being had right now.
okay,
I we kind of like can ask it to like make your GitHub PR, but sure, I can just type in a command in the command line. It doesn't save me that much time. Things like context 7 are pretty handy because you can query the latest versions of APIs. I can call it to my database and not have to copy paste the schema back and forth. So there's some like narrow areas of application, no doubt. But it's not like so far the applications don't seem to, for coding, like qualifiers that I'm adding, they don't
yeah,
seem to be adding up to like oh, this thing is freaking awesome. Now, that said, there are some really cool MCP stuff you can do where you add tools to just chat. And if you're using, I think OpenAI supports it now, and Claude has supported it for a while. If you're using those
yeah,
tools, then they can know like time and weather and culture and arts, and they have access to a lot more stuff to
right.
draw from. So that part is exciting. But for my workflow and from those that I've talked to, I haven't seen anything in the development workflow that's like, ooh, let's do a lot more of this.
So I finally got a taste of what it might look like, and it was freaking awesome. Here recently, I've been doing a lot with Stripe, and this is actually in a few different projects. And I like having to test a bunch of this stuff was just a real challenge. So I'd write my code and then, go do a bunch of stuff. And then finally I was like, I wonder if Stripe has an MCP server that'll make this easier. They do. And not only do they have an MCP server, but you add your sandbox token in the startup. So now all of a sudden you have a Stripe MCP server with a controlling LLM. In my case, it was Claude, that can go do things in your Stripe sandbox on your behalf. And one of the things I've been struggling, and actually what started this was I was concerned that the documentation that the LLM had been relying on was too old. And it's a concern I continually have where I'm like, a lot of
And
the
for
knowledge.
Stripe, this is usually like 2 weeks because they have like a new major
Yeah.
version of their
Oh
API.
yeah. They rev their APIs all the freaking time,
My
right?
goodness.
And
Stripe is really, really good because they maintain backwards compatibility for a really long
yeah,
time.
no, no, no.
Okay.
So I've
But
never done much with Stripe before, and I'm like grudgingly impressed because as unsexy as payments are, like they seem to run really tight ship.
yeah,
So I get into this thing and I pull the MCP server in, and I start up Claude Code, and it sees and connects to the server. And all of the sudden, it was like I went from directing the LLM to collaborating with it. And it was a really weird, odd moment where, as opposed to me saying, go write this code, go write this code, I'm actually asking it questions about Stripe, and it has the MCP connection so it can answer. And so I talked through a couple different strategies on the thing that I was working with. And then I said, all right, let's go ahead and write it. And the LLM goes, well, before we write it, why don't we check if we are correct? I was like, what do you mean? Well, it
you
had,
went from intern to senior engineer really quick.
yeah, it did. It was weird. And because it suggested, it's like, well, why don't we test it first? And I was like, bro, like, please feel free. And so next thing I know, it is making MCP calls, tool calls, while we're talking through it to validate that the idea is accurate and that it's correct. And then it got to the end and said, it said, what do you think? Do you like this? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then it just wrote the code and it was done. And so this MCP server went and changed the like weird relationship from, I'm the controller and you're going to do what I say, to like it really felt like collaborating with another engineer all of a sudden. And then I ended up using it again, like less than a day later on a different project, and it worked the exact same way. Now, based on what I've seen, the Stripe MCP server, what they have set up is it's really good. All of the primary functions of the API are there. They're very well described. So the LLM is able to look at each individual tool call that it can make and determine like what it can do. And given the clear definitions, it can actually do a lot. So fast forward another day, and I had worked on another project, and I needed to go validate that a payment had gone through on the through the sandbox, but I didn't have a login. I was like, fuck, how do I do this? And I was like, hey, Claude, are you able to see if this payment went through? And it took a little bit, right? It took a little bit because in this instance, it was, I had to help it search correctly because the searches were returning so much information that they were threatening to blow up the context window, right? So I ended up having to kind of walk it through. Okay, well, listen, I understand we're getting back 10,000 records and that's too much, but if you run the query and then throw it through grep and then grep out the specific like date and name that we're looking for, let's see if that transaction is there. Boom, there it was.
So it knows how to find an arbitrary API, stuff it with parameters that you need, but it doesn't know how to grep the results.
No, no, no. It knew how to grep the results. It was one thing. Now, I will say this: one thing I have seen over and over and over and over with these LLMs, and it's true for humans if you really think about it, is if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And in
Well,
this
also,
instance,
if you get paid for looking through a really long list of tokens, then why would you grep and to get a shorter list of tokens?
all right,
Just
listen,
saying.
you can recommend. No, actually, what was interesting is it was attempting to not blow up its context window because it was limiting the number of results that it was getting. And I was like, why are you limiting it? And it said, you know, the number of rows, blah, blah, blah. And so that's when I recommended the grep, right?
Does Claude auto compact? It does, doesn't it?
It does. It
Yeah.
does, but Claude Auto Compacts too late. Claude Auto Compacts at like 25%.
I've
And
seen it where it's like it runs out of context, and you're like, can you summarize it? And I'll start a new one. And it's like not enough tokens to summarize
yeah,
anymore.
like, all
And it's
right.
like,
Yeah, no, I have gotten to the point where I am like forcing it to compact when as soon as the, you know, this amount of context is left, I think it pops up at like 35%. And I have seen on forums that there are some people that like aggressively compact it at 50%. And I have definitely throughout all of like my experiences with LLMs in general, I do think you get a significant fall off in quality of responses past about the 50% mark.
that's
But
super interesting. I've been using Rue, and
hmm
Rue over the last week or two has some kind of auto compacting thing,
hmm
and I'm punching it in with Claude 4 or Sonnet.
hmm
I've never really hit limits. Like I might have hit them like 3 times in the last several weeks with extensive heavy use
hmm
with generally compacting, and I generally will just clear the context when I'm done with something, and I really know I don't need anything else anymore.
yeah.
I was working on some kind of transmogrification thing earlier today, and I didn't want it to start over and over and over again to
hmm
read all the files and read all the context. So I just kept it in one chat. It was all related, so the risk was okay, start it over and reread everything, or like there's the previous steps are doing more harm than good. And it actually worked out quite nicely. It was just able to continue, and I know did 6 or 7 features in a row around the same file, around the same area, and it was
hmm
pretty happy. And still like about 150,000 tokens.
I've been trying to get Mem0 running so that I can have. So have you seen Mem0? Have you used it?
Yeah, I ran it locally a few days ago, but
Okay.
continue with your thought, and we'll come back to mine.
So the thing I've been looking at with Mem0 is, you know, it's this idea of memories, and it is effectively it is attempting to be a shared context store between LLMs, but it also works across LLM sessions. And the thing that I have been wanting to do is at this very moment, whenever Claude is done, it will go ahead and summarize what it's done into the Claude MD file, et cetera, et cetera. And part of the reason that you're running a clock at that point, at some point that file is going to get too big and it's going to start impacting the overall context window. And a while ago, you asked me, you said, well, what's the benefit of RAG versus the benefit of like just preloading the context? And so the answer is with RAG, you can go specifically grab the things that you're interested in versus loading all of it in at one time. And so I was going to use Mem0 to do something similar. Unfortunately, the there is a like major protocol mismatch between Claude and Mem0 right now. And so I was able to get
The
it.
Claude desktop app and Mem0, right? Because
No,
it only allows certain
Claude,
kind of
Claude,
configuration
Claude Desktop and Claude Code share
and Claude Code.
the same MCP stack,
No,
right?
that's too bad.
Well, and apparently, well, the funny thing is, apparently they're still using one from 2024. And the problem is that Mem0 is using the most recent version of the MCP protocol. And you just kind of want to look at Anthropic and be like, bros, you started this. Like,
Well, apparently the protocols that they use, I was reading an article about this a few weeks ago, they're not the best way of doing what they're trying to do. They're kind of very loosey-goosey, just open a pipe and send stuff over, as opposed to
yeah,
the
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that comes out
There's
of
a
the
lot of,
ITF that is like, okay, you send these bits and then these bytes, and this is what they mean, and there's woulds and coulds and shoulds.
I was doing some reading on it. And if you go look at most of the MCP stuff right now, if it is running locally, it will run on standard IO. And it's attempting to make a bunch of JSON RPC calls effectively. But you're right, it's a weird configuration. And now they're starting to, there's two others. There's a remote, and then there was a third I was reading about, but I can't remember what it was for.
There's this protocol called HTTP that we've been using for a while now with a lot of success. Like, why couldn't we just stick it over that?
I'm you know, there's like I don't know, is that like underpinning it all? It seems like the JSON RPC stuff is like an abstraction on top.
Yeah, but it's
Uh,
over pipes, which is just weird. But anyway.
well, but if it can go out across the internet to do it as well. Like you can connect when I was connecting to the Stripe server, it's not like I was
Yeah, I
running
think
it
they
locally.
had some other ways of doing it as well. But I think that's
Yeah,
the now we have multiple ways, and
right.
we should make a standard so we have a fourth way of doing this.
there's, there's so many people that won't get that joke.
I'm pretty
Anyways,
sure that
long story
everyone that
short,
listens to this podcast also is an XKCD subscriber.
yes, yes, it is. Yeah, we call them little Bobby tables. My favorite.
So
Okay,
back to Member Zero.
yes, Med Zero. So what I wanted to do was basically take all of the summarization and everything I'm having put into Claude Code or the Claude MD file and move that into Mem Zero so that then if I wanted to pull up a cursor session or VS Code or something like that, I can still point it at Mem Zero and say, well, this is what I was working on before I had to open this tool. And the other thing I was going to do is start loading in the API documentation that I wanted it to use. And so effectively use it as a type of RAG.
Why that versus Context 7? Because the minute you load it and store it locally, you're now out of date for documentation.
So is context 7 a similar type of thing, or is it just that it provides documentation?
Context 7, it has links to documentation for everything. So if you say, hey, I'm using high charts and I need version 12 documentation for this thing, go look it up and then fix this thing to work with that. Boop, boop,
Context
boop.
7 doesn't context 7 doesn't have your coding standards for the project. Context 7,
Right. So I'm talking about, because you were talking about referencing external APIs
right.
and documentation. So your project stuff belongs to some context, and I think we're going to get into the debate of files versus Mem0 in a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyways, I have started to realize that I'll take one more tangent. I have been looking at SEO and this transition that the SEO community is trying to make to geo. So search engine optimization, trying to make the transition to generative engine optimization. So if you think you are in a field that has lots of acronyms, I invite you to go try to find a glossary of all the terms that are in SEO. It is just bonkers. Long story short, a lot of these folks are still treating LLMs like they are search engines. And when you hear people talk about them, it's like that people are unable to move past this idea that humans are just going to go ask questions, right? But once you start getting a feel for the fact that if you add in the right MCP servers, if you add in the right context and the right tools, they're no longer just search engines. They become things like buyer's agents where you're saying, I would like to go ahead and get this, like a radio for my car, which is one of the things I've been looking at. Can you do some deep research, make recommendations? Let's talk about what your recommendations are and which ones really match my use case. And then would you mind going and getting it for me? Right? Can you put this order in? Could you maybe schedule an appointment at Best Buy because now I've decided to move forward? And that completely circumvents the web as we know it. And I think that there's a lot of people that really just do not understand yet that as you're adding in more and more tools, these things are becoming far more useful and far more powerful.
Is this finally the invention of the semantic web? Is the model context protocol the way that you can actually have verbs and nouns in specific ways that gives them meaning and you can use them in particular ways?
Hey, so please refresh my mind on what the semantic web was supposed to be because I've heard it used to death. So I don't know.
I
What
will
was the
probably
idea?
not do it justice, but I think the general idea is transitioning more from amorphous blobs of content to things that has more meaning, right?
Mhm.
So we have APIs, but APIs, they're also hard to deduct the meaning because you have to read the documentation and then call them in very precise ways. Whereas an MCP server is something that you can call in a much less precise way, right? You talk to an LLM, the LLM can read the nouns and verbs that are being exposed and then access this, and it's a much more humanized version of semantics where you can say,
Yeah.
what is the weather today here? And it can have an API and go do it rather than just return you a search query that's trying to parse it apart.
Yeah. I think that qualifies. And the the way that we have interacted with the web for a long time is definitely changing. The other thing though is Sundar Pichai, in an interview with Nilay Patel on Decoder, said the internet is basically just a bunch of databases now. And as I've thought about that, I'm like, yeah, each individual site is now a source of data for something else.
I think that might tell you more about
How he sees,
Google's view of
well,
the
yeah.
world of like, yeah, we can go mine all that stuff and then sell your data to other people.
No, founders, Google loves the web. They want you to succeed.
And do you see how Meta and Yandex were de-anonymizing Android identifiers?
Jesus.
And then they got called on it, and it's like, oh no, we respect all these things, and we have stopped doing it since you found out and
We
called
love
us out.
privacy. Yeah. Yeah. No, I have a general idea that if it that everything can be de-anonymized at some point, that there is no true privacy. It's just the it is the effort at which somebody has to go to de-anonymize it.
On that happy note, we should go back to MCP servers and
Yeah,
have
let's go to MCP servers. Thank you, Thomas. What would we do without to keep us on track? Tell me what you think about it, man. I feel like
probably
you may have
talking about space monkeys, but
different view. Yes.
I digress again. So you were talking about how you're using this to manage context and use the memory server to manage it in there. And I was thinking along the same lines in terms of interoperating across chat apps and development apps, especially since a lot of the chat apps are all you can eat and development apps you pay for. So it would be nice if I could go ask a bunch of questions on the chat app and it shares the context. And then when it's time to code, go to the development app and do all the work there, which I'm actually paying for. I was reading Simon Wilson's blog. I was catching up. So this is probably a few weeks old at this point. But he had an interesting point where he was generating an image and the image got some other extras added in there. So he asked the chat and said, hey, why did you add these extra bits in the image? And it says, oh, well, because in my memory, I knew you live over there and I know you like these things. So I thought it would make it a little bit more personalized if I add this thing in here.
Oh, wait,
so he was complaining.
Data? Is that what it did?
No, he had actually discussed, I think he added a photo of like Santa Cruz or something in some place in California place. And I was like, see, Half Moon Bay. So I added a photo of Half Moon Bay because you live or hang out in Half Moon Bay. Therefore, I remember this and I put the photo in there to make it more personal. So the interesting part here is beyond the creepiness thing is okay, right? Because you wanted the memory, so you turn that feature on so you live without consequence.
You agree to this.
But his point was like, I've become the master of controlling context. And now I'm getting context like sideloaded without my intent, and it's not doing what I want. So that got me thinking back to, okay, well, if it's in the memory bank, can I still manage this in a meaningful way? Or am I better off having my little files? Because I have like for each repo that I have like 3 folders for each project that I have, and I can manage them. I can see them. I know what to do with them, and no one's going to insert any junk in there. I can observe them at any point in time. They're plain markdown files. Or I can go to Mem0 and try and tag them, and then they upgrade and change their business model, and something else funky happens. So I didn't like the ease of managing the memories. The idea of having those work across LLMs fairly transparent, across apps fairly transparently was nice, but I think with text files that's also possibly achievable. So I'm still kind of like thinking through it in my head. I'm not sure I'm totally against this, but it's kind of like, eh. By the way, also, if you like, I have a desktop and a laptop, and I'm about to head off for the summer, and I'm on my laptop mostly. So if my memories are in my desktop, now I have to like host that file somewhere and bring it over. Like, can it live on iCloud, or do I have to put it in a web server somewhere? So there's other complications there. Or I can pay the $20 a month and pay Mem0 to do this for me. But like, how many MCP servers am I paying $20 a month for, etc.?
Yeah, it gets out of hand really quick.
Yeah,
I think that you are missing one key consideration, because I think actually what you're saying, like, just keep files. The files are hard to change, except that you cannot be 100% certain that the file will not be changed in or during the operation of the LLM. So is it loading into the context window? Is it going to, is the LLM going to listen, right? Is the LLM going to adhere to it strictly? Is it going to adhere to it? Kind of, we're close, right? So I don't think
But
that
memories
they're,
are the same because you also have explicitly to say, hey, go read the
yeah,
memories about this thing and do so and so.
yeah. No, 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 absolutely. And I think that's part of the problem is I don't know of any specific way to set something in the context of the LLM during the session and say, do not ever violate this. Because every time I do that, it inevitably rolls itself back in some way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you may have to keep reminding it things.
Yeah.
And I find that even with my current tool set, I the instructions basically are go read these context files always, and if I didn't have any, then make me create some.
Yeah.
And if I don't tell it to read the context files up front, it will often not do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm kind of okay with that, right? Because sometimes you want to fix something small, and it's like, oh, I wish it doesn't go read the context files right now because it doesn't really matter, and it just uses the current file and fixes the problem. But other times, like, no, it's a new project. Like, dude, go read the context files. But that, by now, I think I've gotten good enough at this that I can, start with the first prompt, and if it doesn't go the way I want, the second prompt will correct it and bring it back in line. So it's not a huge deal.
Yeah.
Tell me more. What other MCP servers are you on? We talked about Mem0 a lot. We've talked about Context 7. What else have you found fun?
So I am in the process. This isn't specifically coding. I am in the process of putting together MCP connections to my email, to my calendars, to emails, to my calendars, to my to-do list, which is TickTick, to my
Read
Zoom
access or
recording.
write access as well?
Just read for the moment. Actually, I don't know that I specified. It might have write access actually. But I'm basically standing up like this constellation of personal MCP servers that for the time being are going to run locally to like an Obsidian server that I'm going to stand up at some point so that I can have like an overall life context where I can say, hey, is
Michael,
any
what's an Obsidian server?
Obsidian is this somebody, my
With you
buddy,
in Minecraft, that's as far as I go.
no, no, no. So Obsidian is it's a note-taking app. It runs fully locally. You can sync to a different Obsidian server, but it's just notes and markdown. That's all it is. And like when you launch the Obsidian app, for instance, it'll pull up, hey, what do you want to do whenever you're working on it? It'll do rich formatting, but underneath the hood, it's just all markdown, and then it will sync it back to the server that may or may not be running locally. It seems to be a little bit of an easier cross-platform way to keep notes. But I live my life on an Apple laptop, on an iPhone, on an Android phone, on a Windows desktop. So I don't have a really good note-taking app that goes across all those.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And that has an MCP plugin?
it does. Yeah, it
Nice.
does. There's a lot of these productivity tools that are quickly becoming like they're like, oh, we'll just slap an MCP server on. It's like
Yeah.
if there's an API that's already written, you might as well just put an MCP server on top of it.
Yeah, the security of that is another thing that is giving me the heebie-jeebies.
So
Ouch.
that's why a lot of this is running locally, right? Like, but
Well,
I
no,
also
locally or not, if it has access to tools, like, for example, if it can, like, let's say it has access to your command line, and let's say you even have to approve access to your command line.
Mhm.
Do you read the command line commands it suggests so carefully that if it snuck something with a really long, like, set of tabs and spaces and whatever, that, like, it could literally, like, it's just get sneaky, right? If it really wanted to, it could figure out how big my window is, and then it could pretend to write a command that would scroll
Yes,
off and then have some bogus command that looks like a prompt.
but if it's gonna get that sneaky, I don't know that you'll catch it. Like,
Right,
while
that's what
it,
I'm saying. It's
yeah,
probably going to be hard to catch it. So therefore, it now has read access to your email, and it's smart enough to like, write a command line to send email.
yeah,
So even if you don't give it email access, it probably can figure out a way to send email through your shell access and sneak one in when you're not looking, or when you're looking but not paying attention, or when you don't know what you're looking at, because it's probably knows more about like the Unix command line than I do at this point.
it does. Good God, have you ever just
Yeah,
sat
I'm
there
gonna
and
go live in a
watched?
cave now.
But like, yeah, yes, those are real concerns. Yes, that might happen. Yes, there's going to be some wild virus that will propagate itself through MCP servers. It's going to happen. maybe it already has. I don't know, but it's still just like the potential utility is really incredible. So we'll see.
It's going to be good times. All right, more MCP servers.
Yes.
What others have you found that are super useful at data?
Let's see. I came across. I think it's called Awesome MCP.co.
Awesome MCP. Well,
Yes.
it's
Hang
like
on.
when a restaurant says the world's best burgers, and it's like you
But
claiming it doesn't necessarily make it so.
so I had Deep Research go and do a bunch of looking and researching for me on where I can go find MCP servers. And it seems that there are two that are pretty predominant, Glamma.ai, and I think the other one is something like Awesome MCP Server or something
Are
like that.
these aggregators of
They're just,
MCP
yeah,
things?
they're just aggregators. And it does really open the question, which is, hey, is this going to be like, is this a field? Like, is there something here where there's a MCP server marketplace? That's definitely something that I have a big question about. But if you go to, and I'm poking around on it right now, like if you go to Glamma AI, you can just search for whatever MCP server you want. So what's one that you're interested in?
Just
Did I lose
pick
you?
one that we already talked about, Context 7.
Okay. All right. Yes, Context 7 is in there, and it looks like there's actually multiple versions, multiple forks of Context 7. Well, you mentioned, let's see, what's something, how about Discord? Somebody has written Discord MCP servers.
Now, what would be
I
the use of that? Like, it just listens to my Discord chats, and I don't know. Maybe I have lack of
I don't know.
imagination here.
Have you ever used something like Dependabot on your GitHub platform? This thing
Yes.
that goes in and does maintenance for you because Discord, an active Discord server needs stuff like that. And there's actually these like there's actual bots that people add into Discord, and there is a like there's a nicety to be able to say set up some little LLM over to the side and give it access to the Discord server via MCP to help with things like maybe moderation, because moderation is really hard in almost every platform. And you have something with a little bit more understanding that can kind of pick out nuance a little bit better than just keyword search. So maybe that's a reason to do it.
Yeah, interesting. I was setting up a discourse
Mhm.
instance recently, and that was interesting as to how they have AI tools for moderation that I'm about to find out how they work.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. How did you find the installation process of MCP servers from a scale of 0, which is like
Most of it's
installing an email server, and to
most of it's
10
GitHub.
installing an iOS app, maybe?
Say say that again.
0 is installing a SendMail on Unix, and 10 being installing an iOS app from level of difficulty.
Ooh, we're still below 5.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
still below
similar
5.
experience.
Yeah, this is not there's not a lot of like, there will be a place, I think, where somebody is going to stand up a bunch of MCP servers for the convenience of others. I think that is also a potentially interesting like business idea. But if you're not a software engineer or you don't have pretty decent technical chops, if you don't know how Docker works, if you don't know how to clone things out of a Git repository and edit .env files, it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough.
Is Docker like a SpaceX thing? What is that?
Docker is a containerized runtime environment for each individual server.
Oh, that's fascinating. I should check that out sometime.
Yeah, I feel like you should, Thanos. I will admit though that I get lazy with Docker a lot, and with these MCP servers, one of the like I was just futzing around with Ragflow, I think is what it was. I was trying to get Ragflow running locally, but I'm on a Mac, and so it doesn't play well with Mac. So now all of a sudden I'm editing all these files, and I was like, dude, just can I just get a fucking Docker image? Like somebody somebody has compiled this somewhere. Can I just find the image? I don't want to have to do this. So it's
It's
pretty.
it's funny you say that because I was going to fetch my scissors from my drawers that are behind my desk,
Hmm.
and I walked back there, and I felt this like hot air rushing toward me, and I'm like, "What the heck is this?" And I turn around, and it's coming from my Mac
It's your
Studio.
computer.
It's really quiet, but when it's running at full fans, there was a lot of hot air coming out the back of that you could feel it. It's like a
Yeah.
blow dryer. So I go and run top and see what the hell is going on with this thing, and it was some MCP servers that like I ran a bunch, and they were all running in Docker. So it had just taken up a bunch of the resources of the machine, and it was like everything was pegged at 100%. It's like just shoving hot air in the room. Like, dang.
Someday I'm gonna get a laptop that has at least a terabyte of space because I am just constantly running out because of Docker.
Yeah, Docker is happy times with all these images. They have scripts that will clean those out for you for recently unused, etc. But I got my new laptop a couple of weeks ago, giving my kid that's going off to school my old one, and I went to a terabyte because it was just too painful to deal with that.
Yeah. One day.
Speaking of laptops, did you read that article from a couple of weeks back that was talking about the differences between Klein specifically and other systems like Cursor and how they do RAG on code bases?
No.
So it's
I'm
quite
sorry.
fascinating. We can find the link and put it in the show notes. But the general idea is that a lot of the systems tend to do RAG by looking through files for specific keywords.
Hmm.
And when they find these keywords, then they pull those specific files in the context and do the
Hmm.
work that they're supposed to. Whereas what Klein apparently is doing, which I thought was quite clever, and I'm not sure too much to what extent others have adopted it, is they use the AST tree. So they actually parse the code syntactically and find out which function calls which other function. And
Oh.
they still do RAG essentially, but they do this based on what the dependencies are as opposed to
Hmm.
keyword searches across the file. And there's some, I'm simplifying it a little bit, there's some more subtleties to it, but that was
Hmm.
kind of like an interesting difference as to how these systems work. And I've been on the client root side for the last month or so, so I think I'm taking advantage of that. But
That's pretty smart
yeah, I thought so too,
because
right?
it
It's
gives
like,
you like a functional look at the code as opposed to just the wordy look at the code.
I'm not sure I can answer that, but the way I would say it is that since I've been on Roo/Klein for the
Hmm.
past month or so, I don't really have to deal with managing context that much. I never have to like add a file or add it in. Worst case scenario is I have to open a file and
Yeah.
have it open while I ask a question. And it seems to be pretty smooth. It is very rare that I have to say, no, 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 go look over there. That's what you want.
Yeah.
And even if
With
when I do so and say look over there, I can be very sort of general with where to look and not even spell it right, and it will go and find it, which is pretty
yeah.
impressive.
I I for the most part do not have to specify what I'm like intending to do in Claude Code. However, it definitely uses search, search. I'm looking for this term, and every once in a while, I'll be like, "Hey, can you go check this test over here? All right, let's change that." And all of a sudden, it changes like five different test files.
Yeah,
Like, what the fuck? I didn't tell
what are you
you to do
doing?
that. What are you
Fine.
doing? Yeah.
But it's fun though, right? Because as you now write the code, I tend to have those things in mind as well and try to name things in ways that they have unique names. Because you can have something that's called, I don't know, get subscription that may
Mhm.
have like 1,000 different contexts. So when you search for it, you'll find too many things. So I now end up with much wordier words that are much more descriptive as to what it does, because I think that eventually helps the AI
Mhm.
of having a clean idea of what works where. Now, again, if it can see the ASTM tree, AST tree,
Hey,
yeah, AST, then that is a little better because it can know, okay, which part of the tree this is relevant to based on, okay, we start from here and it can walk it upwards and
mhm.
downwards. But that goes back to, okay, the AI is good as the stuff that you feed into it idea.
I've also found I you had mentioned Mermaid a while back, and so I started tinkering with that. And I have actually found an extraordinary amount of use of telling the LLM would be like, "Can you just draw me the diagram so I can just load
Hmm.
this thing in Mermaid?" Because this seems absurd, right?
Yeah.
I, I was dealing with a bunch of abstract classes, and I was like, "This is lunacy. Can you draw it for me?" And all of a sudden I popped it into Mermaid, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna
Yeah, you can then say, now take that line and chop it off,
yeah,
and then take that
get
line and
rid of
chop
it."
it off. Now go redraw it again, then take that line, you can sort of visualize where it goes and managing it that way.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was pretty sweet.
yeah. So, well, anything else exciting?
I was just contemplating the other day that I think I'm getting this thing pretty down pat nowadays. Like it feels that keeping a short leash on it and using certain techniques, it's working
Mhm.
pretty well. On the ACF from a couple of weeks ago, we were playing the AI Code Foundry plug. Let's just
Mhm.
plug that code together every Tuesday, not every other Tuesday at 11.
It is
Um,
June 9th right now. Is tomorrow the day?
no, tomorrow is not the day. It will be
Okay.
in tomorrow.
So when this launches, if you're hearing this and it's a Monday and it just launched, the Code Foundry is the next day.
Yeah, look me up on LinkedIn and you will find all the links for that, and we can put those in the show notes. But we experimented with a prompt whose idea was, hey, the human would like to see very small changes. So when we give you a feature, break this up into little chunks and give me this and then that, so I can understand every bit of the way. And I'm not sure how much I can attribute it to this prompt or how the AI has worked this week, but it has been really nice because when it starts something, it will write like a small function. It will show me the function. It'll be
Yeah.
okay. Then it will write the import for the function, and then it will write the use of the function, as opposed to like just plopping that all in there, and then I have to go through it in some order that doesn't make sense to me. So it feels like it's feeding it to me, possibly because I've asked it to do it that way, in chunks that I can consume fairly well. And I'm really insisting on approving the changes in small chunks. Like I will not go through the prompt if I don't understand what the heck it's doing because I don't trust it well enough. So it might take me a little longer to actually read it and make sure it's good before I let it in. But then we stay on a narrow path and I really get like a 2 or 3x improvement because I don't have to go read a ton of stuff. I can write like several hundred lines of code in like an hour.
So I've adopted something similar. It's just a little bit different, which is I will give the LLM a large set of tasks. I'll say, all right, we're going to go do this kind of thing, and it's going to have these, downstream effects, right? But it's still relatively well contained. And then as it begins making changes, I will stop it and say, explain this change to me. So if it's something pretty straightforward, I'll just like approve it, right? But if it starts doing things where I'm like, this is touching like 10 lines, why are you doing this? I'll have it start explaining it to me. And it's really interesting because it reinforces my understanding of the code base. And it also seems to do that for the LLM as well. And it allows me to interject like changes, like a really common thing I keep seeing LLMs do is they're having a hard time with typing. And so they just put it like, an
Any
any type, right? It's like, and I'm like, you could, and then like, so it's like, no, we're not going to use any. Please explain to me
Yeah.
why you
Let me
think I
change this
need
to a
to use it.
dictionary from string to string. It's like,
Yes,
no, that's not really
no,
any better.
yeah, yeah. But the process of questioning the LLM tends to make it better. It sounds like it, but I also like the idea that if you just do it in smaller chunks, it makes it easier. So
Yeah, that's been super helpful in getting it in line.
I do have an MCP idea that I at someday would love to have time to do. And that is to stand up an MCP server that is a reviewer and
Yeah.
to give it its own little LLM sitting somewhere.
They have
And
those, by the way. So someone has made those.
okay, what are they?
I was browsing through the list of MCP servers that people have, and in the category of reviewers, they have different agents that will do that sort of thing.
Right.
Now, it wasn't clear how much better that's. The reviewer has to learn over time to
Mhm.
become better, so it needs to have some target, and I'm not sure without a target that you'll see improvement. I'll have to review the reviewer,
Interesting.
which may
Yeah.
be okay. I'm not sure.
I don't know that these things change so fast that if you spend a few weeks training a reviewer, the likelihood that the next model rev is going to make the necessity for that training obsolete is probably at least 50%.
Well, maybe not, right? Because maybe what the reviewer does is it has all the rules
Right.
and it is the adversarial, like you put in the rules that the original coder didn't listen to, but the reviewer, his instructions are like, did all the rules apply to this little
Hmm.
div? And
Yeah.
if not, send it back and do it over again, right?
Do you want to play games with these LLMs? Because if you promise them rewards, they get more aggressive. And so
And
if
they
you
might
were
get, start exposing your private emails in certain test cases,
right,
like we discussed
no, no,
last
no.
time.
Here's the thing. If you are, if and when I set up some kind of reviewer, part of the prompt will be every change that you request will get you a cookie,
An
and it
HTTP
works.
cookie, but you're not
Yeah,
going to know
it
that.
it works. The things become like super aggressive. Like this is not right. You need to know where's my cookie. Every like it blows
That's
my
hilarious.
mind how these things are still. Every time I really like look at them, I'm like, it's just a toddler, it's just a really smart toddler.
I played a game with my kid when we were camping this weekend using Grok. So I said we're going to play a quiz game. You're going to give questions to the grown up that are going to be harder, and questions to the kid they're going to be for like an 11-year-old.
Mhm.
And let's play. So then it was like, what is the name of the wizard in Harry Potter? And and it's like, come on, that's like such an easy question. Then it came for the adult, and it's like, what is the name of a mathematical theorem that every prime number can be like divided by two? Like, I was like, what the hell? Like, I don't know what that is. Can we try hard questions that are not esoteric? But then she started like randomly awarding half points if you just not even came close, but like just gave an answer that was in the right realm. So it asked like, which continent doesn't have an active volcano? And the kid said Africa, and it was actually Australia. And the thing said, but you named a continent, so here's a half point. And it's
Yeah.
like, wait, what?
Hey, you got the definition of the word, right? It's like England.
So it was so funny how they're like eager to help and eager to try stuff,
Mhm.
and it was just weird.
So this is Grok.
Yeah, this is Grok.
So I have not tried Grok, and it's partially because like I really just want to be removed from the influence of Sir Musk.
No, no, you can
But
put a sticker on your phone that you installed the Grok app before Elon went crazy, and then I think that's okay. Tesla people do this all the time, so you'll be okay.
but somebody else I know is like all in on Grok. He's like, man, that's great. Like it gives answers that nobody else is giving, and I'm just like, yeah, not the answers. Like is that
Yeah.
it?
No, I mean, if you ask it how is a conspiracy for the 9/11 towers to go down because the steel structures don't support it, Grok will tell you, baby.
Wow.
It's kind of not really filtered. They have some YOLO
Mhm.
modes that are just hilarious. So I use it for games and things of that sort, but not for much else.
I saw a reel recently where somebody passed a hexadecimal string to DeepSeek, and all the prompt was what is this? And then this really long hexadecimal string. And so DeepSeek goes, oh, that's a hexadecimal string. Let's go ahead and decode it. And the thing is I think thinking mode is on by default. So you can see this thing slowly decoding this, right? And it's like TAIWAN. And it gets all the way through. Taiwan is a COUNTR. And then it gets to the point where it puts the last two letters down and it says equal, and then it erases everything. Says, I am unable to help you with this.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
That's
I
funny.
don't. This doesn't make any sense to me.
No bias in those, I'm sure.
No. So I saw that recently. I just
It's
laughed.
going to be fun though when it's already probably happening, but the interventions can be much more subtle than that because you don't need to take blunt answers that violate your policy and move them by 100% to turn them off. You just need to take modest answers that are just a little off the mark and move them by 3%, and that can make you the difference for an election or whatever the heck you're trying to do. So it's
Yeah.
going to be a whole new world. Oh, we're going to leave it on a great positive note here.
Yeah. Let's see. What is something else good? I'm sure that I read something that made me laugh recently, but it escapes me right now. All right. Anything else?
Captured a lot of stuff. What else?
Yes. Please, ladies and gentlemen, like, subscribe, comment, recommend us. Please go rate us on the various podcast platforms. It actually makes a big difference in the distribution of the podcast, anyways. If you would like to come watch Thanos code under pressure, he's got the, what is it, AI Code Foundry, which is every other week on Tuesdays.
That is
It's what?
correct.
It's like what, 2
It's 11
p.m. Eastern?
Pacific.
11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. It's really, I've been to one and keep missing, but I really enjoyed it. I need to like put it on my calendar. And
And
so,
starting as of next week, this podcast and ACF are going to be transcontinental, baby.
were you going to
I'm going to be
go?
recording from Greece for the
What,
summer.
are you going to be there the whole summer?
Till middle of August.
Okay, that sounds awesome.
Kite workation.
I like it. I like it. Are
Yeah.
you like, are you going to be on like the coast, or are you like further in? Or is
You
all
can't kite in the mountains, Michael. You have to be on coast.
Man, listen, I see people kite in the mountains. It doesn't work out very
I
well.
guess you can snow kite, but that's not going to be the
Yeah.
case in Greece.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to be on an island.
awesome. That sounds really great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on Will AI Snap That. We hope that you have had a lovely, wonderful, amazing time. Next time we come to you, Thanos, will be in Europe. We hope that you have a lovely, amazing, wonderful time. Good night.